Africa's natural resources, spread the wealth. The impressive growth figures of resource-rich African countries are not all good news. Feb 10, 2011 pipe from the print edition. Africa's ramshackle cities are wearing crowns of gleaming skyscrapers. 6 of the 10 fastest-growing countries in the world in 2010 were African. Angola grew faster than anywhere else on the planet. Parts of Africa have suddenly taken on a prosperous sheen, drawing talented exiles back to their roots now that they offer a decent living. Talk is of a virtuous circle in which growth feeds expertise, which feeds investment. Some of this new prosperity is the result of better economic policies, but more is the consequence of a boom in commodity prices that has spurred investment in mining and drilling as well as in office towers, bridges and roads. Even if it is mostly the result of luck, who would begrudge Africa's renaissance? At last there is money to spend on helping the poor. The need is great: electrical power and clean water, transport networks that can boost regional trade, schooling and primary health care for all. Sadly, many countries are squandering their best chance in decades. Equatorial Guinea's elite hoards a fortune in opaque accounts. Chad channels wealth to bent officials. In Sudan they inflate the cost of infrastructure projects and siphon off funds. And state firms in Nigeria are privatized by handing them over to crony managers. Africa: the failure is about more than just predictable corruption. Africa suffers from the resource curse, which blights countries nature-made rich. Corrupt states become more powerful because revenues from natural resources flow straight to them. Health and education suffer as poorly paid doctors and teachers take jobs in oil firms. Fighting over resource-rich areas like the Niger Delta frightens investors. The effects of the resource curse are painfully clear in Africa. Insiders and profiteers are increasingly using oil revenues to take over service industries. They crowd out entrepreneurs and create their own monopolies. At first glance, countries like Angola, see article, look as if they have thriving private sectors, but those firms are really loose cartels run by the oil-rich elite. Some governments are also using resource cash to maintain control. Cronies buy independent media and foreign leaders hear that access to oil depends on turning a blind eye to the brutal silencing of domestic critics. And even good intentions often fail the poor. Africans joke that the animal they see most often these days is the white elephant, high-profile investment projects that serve no purpose. Angola has built 24 new hospitals, but cannot staff them because, although it has 18 million people, it has only 1,500 doctors. Although among Africa's richest countries, it is the only one in the world with cases of urban polio. Elsewhere, Africa's rulers have spent billions on their armies. Global defense spending has fallen by 35% since the end of the Cold War. In sub-Saharan Africa it increased by almost a third. The gift that takes away the first responsibility to do something lies with African leaders themselves, at least if they want to avoid a dismal succession of coups and military governments. But concerned outsiders can, and should, help. The IMF and some oil majors have made a good start by pressing governments to publish details of their revenues from natural resources. With accounts laid open, local media might put pressure on kleptocrats. For this, Africa's press needs financial support and training. Microloans and trade links can help entrepreneurs compete with state-backed monopolists. No place without the institutions to hold powerful men to account can completely escape the temptations of huge resource wealth. But Africa's poor deserve so much better. The Wealth of African Nations by Vijay Mahajan. Africa has some of the poorest nations in the world, but it is wealthier across the continent than India. The average gross national income, GNI, per capita across all 53 African nations in 2005 was about $954, more than $200 higher than India's. As the map illustrates, 12 African nations, with 100 million people among them, out of 53 had a GNI per capita that was greater than China's. 20 nations, with a combined population of 263 million, had a GNI per capita that was greater than India's. That concentration of wealth represents a huge potential market for companies worldwide. Of course, serving this market means overcoming the myriad economic, political, legal, medical, and social challenges facing the continent. But businesses across Africa have already proved that this is possible, feeding a fast-growing demand for every conceivable type of consumer good and service, from cell phones to banking to televisions. Africa is defying its image as a charity case, prompting entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial businesses to invest in it as they presciently did in India 2 decades ago. China follows British footsteps to African wealth by Justin Roll at BBC News. Angola. Chinese investment in Angola is bringing back to life one of the greatest rail routes in Africa, the Benguela Railway. In return, China gets oil, but are accusations of a colonial-style scramble for resources fair? The line stretches from Angola's west coast to the Zambia border. Of course, the Chinese laborers get paid, and their wages come out of a cheap loan which the Chinese government made to the Angolan government. And that loan, in turn, is paid for in oil. So in some sense oil money is still the motive. So, while it may be tempting to see today's China as just another imperial power out to exploit the riches of Africa, it seemed to me that there is a big difference between the Chinese presence and the British one. The China-Africa Development Fund. The China-Africa Development (CAD) Fund was established by the China Development Bank as an investment vehicle in Africa. Background: founded in March 1994. The China Development Bank is under the direct jurisdiction of the State Council. Debts issued by the China Development Bank are fully guaranteed by the central government of the People's Republic of China. It is one of the largest issuers of bonds in the People's Republic of China. In March 2007, the Chinese government officially established the China-Africa Development Fund. The funding will be broken out in 3 stages, totaling $5 billion, with the first phase being funded by the China Development Bank. Strategy and objectives: the fund will be able to invest in stocks, convertible bonds, and other quasi-equity type of investments. It may also invest in a fund of funds type of investment.